Hi,
Yes.
thanks everyone for joining on time. My name's Akshay. I'm one of the co-founders at Dots. Joining me is Yashna, who is also a co-founder, and Pratiksha, who works with us on these sorts of webinars and the knowledge that we share out in the world through content. The three of us will be leading this webinar today. Our idea is that through this webinar, we want to really focus in on how dots can be used across processes, especially by program teams or MEL teams and nonprofits, and how they use that. So essentially, what we'll be doing is kind of really getting into the weeds a little bit around what actually happens, with the qualitative data. I'm sure all of you have joined because, that you have a curiosity around qualitative data, primarily because you are drowning in it, right? You've done interviews, you've done various kinds of surveys through the course of your uh, various programs. There are field notes. Nowadays, you're getting feedback via WhatsApp groups, WhatsApp chatbots. You have partners uploading reports, Excel trackers, and so much more, right? There's so much data that you're sitting with, and that's a mix of quant and qualitative data. But I think the question that we've gotten so often is how the hell do you really use it, right? That struggle is real in terms of actually using all that data that gets collected. And so you're sitting on a treasure trove, but not able to get into how to actually collect that. And the reality is that MEL teams, but also research program teams are dealing with trying to bring multiple data sources together that are getting collected through different channels, through different formats. They're mostly unstructured responses. It's not necessarily that people are responding to specific questions, and you want to be able to make sense of that. The ideal way to do it is to code it manually, but as programs scale, the data scales, and it becomes nigh impossible to actually do manual coding there. And what you're ending up with are quick summaries, which when you read those summaries, even they're barely scratching the surface. What that means is that insights are delayed, that in the thick of things while the program is running, you're essentially, kicking that can down the road, saying that when we have to develop that report at the end of the year or at the end of the program is when we look at that data. Very, very importantly, the learnings are siloed, and they get siloed in different ways. There is a sort of geographical silo. So teams that are meeting together at a district level or at a state level, they hold certain learnings which gets uh, doesn't get captured because it's tacit knowledge. Or those silos could be across teams. So if a larger organization has multiple programs working with the same community, sometimes the insights sit across those different program teams, or a communications team holds certain insights that don't go to the MEL team, that don't go to the program team, that don't go to the fundraising team, perhaps, right? And the most important thing is the sheer amount of time that it takes for you to be able to manage all of this data, to process it, analyze it, and then finally report that, right? And that's what makes continuous learning difficult. And our observation is that qualitative data becomes very critical for that continuous learning to happen. And as we'll kind of talk about in the demo, often, the quant analytics that you are monitoring will show you what's going on. But if you're really doing the learning, right, you need to understand the why, and that is lying in your qualitative data. So today, what we're going to do is we've broken this down into a few parts. So we're going to talk about some points in this process. So How do you collect, organize, analyze, collaborate using dots, and putting all of that together? What does dots really enable? Um, Ankita, just a request if you could refrain from annotating. Thank you. Um, so this is what we'll be covering in today's demo. Um, And what we'll be doing is that because we can't show you actual partner platforms or data because it's obviously their program data, we'll be using a case study with synthetic data. So the case study that we've developed is around familiar enough type of a program where this education nonprofit, we're saying partners with a state education department in 3 states to support teachers in government schools. And what they're doing is they're designing and deploying non-academic curriculum. So social emotional learning, classroom engagement, student well-being, and they train the teachers on how to really deliver these practices effectively. And the scale of this program, as we said, is multiple districts, 300 schools across 3 states, and covering about 1,200 teachers. Right. So that's broadly, the case study that we are looking at for this. So we'll keep coming back to the same case study while showing you the various features of how DOTS works. So let's get started with that first step of how data actually kind of comes into the platform. And over the last few years of doing this work, speaking with and working with multiple non-profits in India and elsewhere, these are some of the pain points that we've heard consistently, that data either is coming or should be coming from multiple sources, multiple stakeholders at different levels. Unfortunately, there are never standardized formats across partners, across program teams, across levels. There is a mix of offline and online data, and essentially what that means is that it's one to several people's jobs to manually clean and consolidate it into master sheets, right? And then that becomes so unwieldy, and you don't know if at the end of it you've got it all. And it's this continuous process. Every time you think you're done, another quarter is over and you have that whole process starting again. And importantly, what we've seen when helping partners bring data into dots as well is qualitative responses sit in Word documents, Google documents, which become really hard to analyze because they're sitting in separate documents or in documents that are several hundred pages long, with transcripts or notes that are hard to filter or use in any meaningful way. Um, and
Just
that's
if we
what,
can pause at that point,
yeah,
and if anybody wants
yeah.
to add in chat, what all points do you think at the collection stage resonate with you all? Even if they are beyond these 5 points, please share those or just write in like the numbers that you feel are some problems you're tackling with. Okay. In case there's something that you want to share, please do add your points. We will move on with the demo then.
So the way that DOTS helps is that we help bring data from multiple sources into one place. And the way that we do that is through a number of different uh, systems, right? So one is through having standardized data templates through which teams can directly add structured and unstructured data into the system. You can ingest new data by just collecting it, perhaps using tools like Gobo, Google Forms, or ODK, and then bringing the data into the system, or helping to capture structured qualitative data. So I'm just going to show you, what that could potentially look like for this education program. So here we have a setup for this education organization, and here you can see there are different types of data sets. So this first data set, which is the teacher's ID template, is like a register, right? And the register essentially means that we have a whole bunch of the teachers who are part of this program registered on this platform, and we have some basic data about them, right? In this case, we're only locating them and the name of the school. You could potentially, if it is relevant, add demographic data, right? So this usually acts as a basis around which all other data sets are then connected. In our case, we have data coming in from facilitators. So the facilitators add, data at the before the program, during the program, and the end of the program, where they go in and they essentially will tag the teacher that they are looking at, and they add their observations. What were the key highlights? Let me open this one up so you can have a look. So, they've added their notes here, like around whatever is the key highlight of the classroom observation before the program starts. What challenges are they observing during that classroom observation? And they have a conversation with the teacher and put the transcript on this on the platform, right? So that's how the facilitator is adding notes. Then like in many programs, you might do a survey, right? In this case, it's a teacher adoption survey with the teachers, and it's a mix of qualitative data and some things where they are simply selecting whether things were effective or not. And so you're able to start getting survey data into the platform as well. And in our case, what we've also shown is that a researcher goes out and does focus group discussions with students, and they add the transcript from that focus group discussion. In this case, with 6 students who have a particular teacher that they are learning from. So this is how we've got different types of sources from which data is coming in. There's also observational data. So here you just have a bunch of ratings around specific uh, variables that are important. In our demo, we've merged baseline and endline data, but in most cases, obviously, those would sit apart, right? So here we get some quantitative data around confidence scores or performance scores. So these are sort of different types of data sets that can be brought in to a single into dots as a single space for all the data sets. And all of them are tied together by a register. In different use cases, you could have registers around different types of stakeholders or centers, and use that as the basis to connect all the data to each other. Now I'll quickly show you a couple of ways in which data gets added. So imagine that we were also collecting stories from teachers, right? What the teacher might do, they have a login to the platform, is that they would be able to add that information, and they might come to something like this, right? So they would add a title for their story. In this case, because they would be logged in as themselves, this would auto populate. And this is where our system is really interesting to enable storytelling. Now, when we've looked at storytelling over our journey over the last 6 or 7 years, what we've realized is that if you give a blank page to someone, they're not going to be able to share much. And usually we go in the other direction, which is to have it to be too detailed. And so what we have done with several of our partners is give a little bit of a structure. So in this case, we asked the teacher for some context or background. What is the challenge that they want to talk about while they were adopting, that particular practice? How did they adapt? to that challenge and what the current situation is. Now, the important thing is that we have a little hints feature. What that means, oops, sorry. Um, what that means is that we're giving the teachers some triggers to think about what to put into their story. So, what class, subject, or activity were you teaching? How many students were present? Which new practice or approach were you trying to use? And was there anything important that day, in the class, limited time, large class, difficult topic, something like that, right? And so, what happens with that is that then the teacher has a few hints, some triggers to give you richer information. And so this becomes a really good way of bringing in, qualitative data. Similarly, our forms are adaptable, and you can essentially collect all kinds of data. So if you are a facilitator, adding the data, you can have a form where you tag the teacher, have short form text input, even have, quantitative fields in which you can put that data over here. So one is that we have our own templates of forms to collect data directly. And importantly, you can also collect data, bring data into the platform using CSVs. And I think maybe there was a question about formats in the chat. So, this is, imagine that you have a spreadsheet where every column is a question, and every row is one of the forms that has been filled up, or one entry essentially. And so you can have quantitative questions, you can have short form qualitative questions, long form qualitative questions, and add that into the platform. And the way that you do that is that I can import a new data set, select CSV, and essentially simply import a Excel sheet. What that does is it gives you it pulls in the data, it reads the formats, and it gives you the first best idea of what that particular column is. So in this case, it's looking at it as a single select or a radio button question. And as I go further on, it could be text fields or rich text fields. And that's how, you can import that data. There is really not too much of a limit as to what size of data you can bring into the platform through this format, right? So we've done several thousand rows of surveys as well. Yashna, should I pause to answer any of the questions, or you've got it in chat?
Responding to a few, but maybe we can take it up later.
Okay.
Whichever is left. Yeah.
Sure. So these are some ways in which data comes into the platform. The other couple of ways that data comes in is through integrations, where you have sort of direct data being pulled directly into the platform. We have integrations that we do for partners, which are custom integrations around WhatsApp chatbots, Slack, platform commons, and many others. So, in case you have your own system for collecting or managing data, we can pull data from those sources as well. But the idea is that, when you're bringing data into a system like this, there are still issues around organizing that data, right? So manual coding takes a really long time to do. And at least for qualitative data, that becomes a very, very important basis of organizing the data. That if you're able to code or annotate the data thematically, it gives you a strong basis on which to then do that analysis, right? And even if you have that, how do you group similar responses? How do you look at changes in patterns over time? How do you filter? So the idea is that, sure, you've done the coding, but how do you filter along certain demographics or themes as you start to do that analysis? And this is where, we've built at the core of Dots, we look at how, we can use large language models or AI to help with that categorization, with annotation. And because, the data has been imported with certain metadata, and I explained to you that system of registries, you have that structured metadata, which allows you to do some very interesting filtering in our annotation explorer. That's where all the annotations show up. And the important thing, right? One of the pain points that I forgot to mention was the fact that, very often that issue around siloed analysis also happens because every team looks at the problem through their lens, right? Your classic story of the elephant and the six monks. And the idea is that how do you have a consistent shared tags manager so that everybody is looking at the same themes in a shared fashion across different programs, across different teams, so as to build a deeper, a more holistic understanding of the issue you're working on, right? I'll just pause here for you to look at the pain points as Yashna's put in the chat. If any of this really stands out to you, please do share in the chat. We'll just give it, a minute for you to kind of add some of that. Okay, let's move forward. So let me show you how the annotation features work. So back to the education demo. Let me open up, maybe this facilitator field notes during the program. This one is annotated, but we'll still look at it. I'm just going to pull this into review so that I can annotate it. Now, there are three ways to do annotation in any system. Let me clear this one just to show you. The idea is that, you have this piece of unstructured text, right? But the point is that this particular sentence relates to a theme or a sub-theme or a tag that you're looking at. And so what I can do is manual annotation, which is what I'm showing you right now. I'm picking up a particular piece of text and I'm saying this particular piece is about shared classrooms, let's say, right? And I could apply that, and I can, also edit it. I can clear it. Now, the important one is when you can do, get some assistance from our built-in AI features. So I ask for some suggestions. Now, for those suggestions, essentially, what our system does is that we look at something called platform context. For every organization or team that is using the system, we help them set up a detailed platform context, which means that we understand what the organization is doing, how are they going to be using dots, what are their outcomes or research or learning goals, and information about their data sources and materials. And of course, within this, we also, capture things like what is the tagging logic and so on. What we then also do is that the system has access to the themes manager. Here we have a three-level system for themes, sub-themes, and tags. And in all of these, we also add one-line descriptions. So using a combination of the platform context and the themes manager with the descriptions, we get a whole bunch of suggestions from the AI. And I can apply, one of the annotations if I want. I can, also ignore it. I can say, hey, this one I don't want to take. And so this is our second way in which you can annotate all of this data, which is sort of more of a human in the loop. So the annotation helps to bring the data, the suggestions to the fore, but it's up to you whether you want to take it or not. And the third way to do it is completely automated annotation. So across your data set, we run complete auto annotation using the platform context and the themes manager. Of course, any annotation like these have been done previously by the AI. You can kind of go and edit it also. I can say that, actually, this one is not so much about student participation. It's more about hesitation. So I'm just going to apply that, right? And this one, before applying it, I can edit it and say that this one's not so much about, group work, It is actually more about infrastructure limits, and I can apply that one, right? And then hit that. So these are different sorts of flexibilities that you have when annotating the data. Now, what happens after you've annotated the data, right? Is all of those annotations come in, are what we call the annotation or highlights explorer. Now, this platform has a lot of data. As you can see, we have multiple data sets, and it has been auto annotated. So there are 26,000 annotations. That's a lot, right? How are you going to kind of make sense of that? One is, of course, that you have this visualization up top that shows you occurrence of various tags across your data sets. You might say that, I want to look at only particular data sets. So you say, I don't want to look at teacher stories or the teacher practice adoption survey, let's say. I want to look at only these data sets. So good. That brings the thing down, and you want to particularly look at what the data is showing in Madhya Pradesh. Now, the reason that we're able to do this is because the teacher registry has the state tagged in it, and every other data set, every survey form, etc., is tagged with the teacher ID. So it's a roll-up filter. So I say I want to see only the data in Madhya Pradesh, right? And so it narrows that down. But what you really want to study, right, specifically, right, might be a particular theme, right? So you want to really get into looking at, uh, sorry, you might want to look at a theme such as exclusion, right? And so I select that particular tag, and it brings brings that to the fore. And now I've really kind of narrowed in on what students, teachers, facilitators are saying around the issue of exclusion in Madhya Pradesh. And I can go through and I can read all of these annotations. If I want to track a particular annotation back to its source, I can do that. I can open up the actual raw data from where this has come, and it'll give me a highlight so that I can see before and after that annotation. And if I want, I could summarize this as well. So these are some ways, going back to the presentation, that you can organize the data. I'll just hand off to Yashna to talk also about how you then go into different ways to analyze this data and how program teams are using that.
Super. Thanks, Akshay. I have been attempting to answer a few questions on chat, but there are a few left, which I think Akshay will pick up. All right. So I think one of the points for the webinar was also focusing on analysis and focusing on making sure that data, when coming in the structured or unstructured way, can be analyzed in different forms. So that's the other part of this presentation of how do you really look at the data. But we did want to cover how collection and organizing helps, because that becomes the foundation for analysis. And essentially, that becomes the way organizations can actually use it for programmatic decisions. Bringing that MEL lens back is also important. So here are some pain points that we feel we've heard from people around hard to identify patterns at scale. What happens when data keeps coming in? An analysis happens during reporting and at the end, and you're struggling with, oh my God, we have to finish all the analysis together. So in case these resonate, please share on chat. Because we'd love to know. This is also a piece that we've been working on quite recently. So a lot of advancements are coming like on a daily basis. So all your input is also important, and be happy to share what we're doing. But other points are cannot compare segments easily, call quant is disconnected, and decisions are based on purely anecdote. So these are some points that we've written. Please share if there are more points. But how we're doing this, how DOTS helps, right, is that we focus on pattern detection across responses and data sets. Segment comparison is through the metadata that has been added, and Akshay shared a bit about that metadata concept, that your data gets tagged in a way that it's easy to discover. There's mixed method analysis that is possible, and the idea for us for making this platform was how do you make sure continuous insights keep coming in. So there has been a few things that we've been doing. So as Akshay shared a part of the demo, we have something which, based on whatever data comes in, the way we've structured the data as well as the AI systems that we've enabled gives you some parts of seeing inside as it's coming. Now, for an MEL team, it's important to also see what is the ongoing data speaking, how is the program performing throughout, right? So I can at all times start seeing what are my emerging pain points, what are the opportunities or delights that have happened on the platform. I have the ability to see, okay, how much of my data is actually analyzed. I can go inside each of those things. That language barrier is one bigger point for students and teachers, whatever they've reported. I can, okay, find what all they're saying. So that's at the overview thing that I can start seeing as pattern, because if I start seeing something is dropping and something is rising, I need to actually go and see the data. For instance, here there is a way to see, okay, what are my tags that are rising or coming up, and what I'm seeing is, okay, fatigue, silent classrooms, exclusion is actually increasing, whereas peer learning, emotional safety, group work is actually going down. And that's an alarming insight, right? I need to actually go find where is fatigue really setting up. So in my highlights explorer, as Akshay shared, I could actually go and filter the data for fatigue, and I can be like, hey, I want to see in Madhya Pradesh what are people talking about fatigue, and actually see the insight. So if my team in Madhya Pradesh can do something about this in real time rather than looking at it at the end line or like after the year is over, how can I keep improving my program as my um, data is coming in, and how can I keep listening to the voices from the ground, to the voices which are coming from different sources. So that's essentially the first part of start seeing analysis, start using analysis. What we have also is pattern discovery, and how do you really look at patterns and insights from the pattern that are coming in, data that is coming in. And I can start seeing something which is like a summary. I see what are my key takeaways from the data. Of course, you can apply dates, and eventually a lot more things will come in here where I could basically see. Oops, can you hear me?
Yeah,
Nothing in my
yes.
audio got. All right, perfect. So I can see my takeaways, what's most common, what shows up together, surprising connections. And essentially, this is just an overview, but this is where you go deeper. What has shown the most? I can zoom in if what has shown the most, how many occurrences of a particular tag, how many co-occurrences of tags, and you can see the quantification of this as well. So it's important to start seeing, to start correlating. We will have a layer over this of saying what are my insights around this, what are my opportunities around this, and then what are like those insights that you miss, right? So usually when you talk to a qualitative researcher, they often say that you have to look at the bell curve from all angles, right? If those edges, can I see those outliers also come in? This is where you can actually find the outliers of, okay, what are the off connections? Can I find a little more insights here? And we also have a way to go deeper into it. So I want to find negative sentiment polarity, and in that negative, and I want to cross it with topics, and I can see that, okay, again, infra and language barriers are coming in here. So what is the correlation between those two? So a lot of analysis, in-depth insights, pattern can be found for a team to be like, hey, I need to take an action right now in a particular state because, or a particular district, because things are not working, and how can I support my field team as well? And we'll cover that in a bit, but just also going a little deeper into further finding out patterns from my call and quant both. There have been quantitative data sitting on the platform, there has been qualitative data sitting on the platform, and every day we're trying to make that effort of how do you bridge that gap between call and quant. So while both these data sets connect, we have something called Ask AI, where you can find out, okay, give me numbers of practices adopted by teachers broken by state, and tell me what the teachers are saying about the most adoptive practice. So it gives the quant part, but it also then says, okay, what are the qualitative insights that are coming up from teachers who've shared input, right? And since we have that stories option always open, that stories can keep coming in. An example is Make a Difference uses this for volunteer stories, and they keep capturing data on an ongoing basis. And the way they look at stories is also this, that input comes as a way for not just the program teams to learn from it, but also volunteer to learn from it, because they keep recording their journey. So a lot of this can come in as an ongoing practice and not looked at, oh my God, this will happen once my inline happens. So it's just breaking that bounds of how are you thinking about MEL is something we're trying to showcase and question if that can be adapted. So, and you can always see references. So every answer will have where is the reference coming from? How are you getting that data? And one interesting feature which we feel is quite useful is something like, okay, I asked that question, which is, oh, total teachers, what are they saying? But I can actually filter all the data from a particular, like I can go into a particular state, I can go into a particular district, and then ask that question again. So there's like a ability to really narrow down my responses to a particular like whatever district or unit I want to go and then find out. Won't go in the depth further, just to give you an overview of how you can use different tools for MEL. And what we, again, just, sorry. What is also a possibility is simply bringing the call and call together yourself, while there are features which do that. But as a professional, as somebody who knows the data the most, you can build that narrative. So you can also do analysis by saying, hey, I want to first find out that what is the um, classroom management after score that people are talking about. Or you'll be like, hey, I don't just want to find out that score, I want to see, okay, how does this score shift from classroom management after, and then add before, and just say subtract, right? And that is the shift that I can see between the score before and after. But at the same time, what I can do is I can actually go into the qualitative parts and say, can I get teacher reflections also? So do they add up? And then apply a filter to a particular theme, and see those annotations. So there is a way to bridge that call cont gap. Currently, in a way where you bring in the insights together. But how, and that's essentially some of the ways of analyzing data, making that data available for your team to see. But I think one point that I want to make with this analysis is collaborating and reporting, because it's not just about your team, it's also about the entire organization. And some of the points that we felt that are always a pain point for organizations to report, that they stay in silos. Sure, you give this tool to an MEL person or to a team who does work with data, but field teams never engage with that. Or usually they stay in PDF outputs and reports, and rebuilding that analysis over time for different thematic is always a thing for the teams. And we often see them always drowned in data. So the way we've done reporting is also a way for having shared workspaces, having ways of looking at data together, looking at data in a way that is relevant to a field team member. For example, what we're doing with Make a Difference is that the volunteers who are adding data also see their data. And they see their data because they want to improve their classroom. They want to see, okay, how has my child improved versus how have my attitude also changed. So because of the stories, there's a lot of qualitative insight. There's also a way to bring in the Ask AI widget and say that, hey, you can actually see what others are also doing, so learn from that. And it's a single reporting system that is available for them, and for the program teams they can see aggregates of states, districts, or whatever they want to create. But an example of this is a report, say, created by me, and I've shared it with the team, right? I want to talk about teacher experience, so practices adopted, what are the thoughts on the effectiveness of practice. What are teachers saying in terms of reporting as reasons for them to be able to adapt? What are my annotations saying? So implementation channels with negative experiences. So I've created this report, and this report is available for the team to share or access. And this particular one is, say, created by Akshay, who's said that, okay, average emotional safety score, or like what is the shift between participatory method score. So you can build your different kinds of analysis come together for teams to access. And it can be simplistic also for a field team member. If you don't want to add these widgets, you can just say, what are the key learnings that have happened in your area? Or what are the challenges, and how can you particularly improve those challenges? So the idea is for more and more people to look at data, and how can you look at evidence is something very critical to how we're shaping the platform. So that's essentially the part of analysis and reporting. There are more things to it, and I know we've gone a little fast because we wanted to cover a lot in this 1 hour. But the idea, again, as I said, is for us to enable faster programmatic decisions, evidence-backed learning. Cross-team visibility has been one of the core design principles for us. And for you all to have like reduced reporting time and continuous MEL insights. So from collect to organize to analyze and then reporting, that's been the approach of how can we simplify. Of course, we've not solved all problems, but we're also working towards making this platform better for something which is a one-stop solution for MEL teams to do analysis. Um, we do often get asked, I don't know if in the chat there has been a question around why not use GPT, Claude, Notebook LM, or other tools. And there are some things that for us have been focused on, as I said, continuous learning, structured insights, team workflows, mixed method analysis, institutional memory, as well as good for large and multiple data sets. There are some great things the other tools can do. We also leverage a lot of AI tools, but we've leveraged in a way that it becomes a part of the system and not just dictate the system. So that's been the as I'm saying, design principle for us. And that's been the focus for making this as a continuous learning system for MEL teams. I'll just pause because we wanted some time for questions. We also have a way of doing a mapping session of your use case, so please write to us. But happy to pause for questions. I know there have been a few in chat. I'm just going to stop screen share. Anything we've missed in the questions till now, or we want to bring up a specific part of the question?
We've answered most of the questions.
Oh, so
Is Hi, firstly, thank you so much for doing this walkthrough for us. It's really helpful. I was wondering if there is a way for me to experiment with the dots, like just, in a very like limited feature kind of way, just to see for myself, because both of you are like such experts, so navigating the whole system is so easy for you that you are pulling out insights very quickly. But what ends up happening, even like I've used MaxQDA quite a bit, and what ends up happening is that there are so many features, and by the time we learn the features, the insights, it takes time to get on the tool. So I was wondering if there was like a free version that we could explore.
So there are, thanks for that, Dhanashri. There are two options of how we work with the trials kind of a thing. One is definitely a trial, which is a short term, 2 week thing. So people get used to, if they have some data, it has limitations in terms of data size and features, because collect may not be available for trial. So there are some limitations, but we do open to get access. The other is because if it's an MEL team, it's not about just getting a hang of the tool. It's also about seeing how it's coming to use. That's where we then decide if a pilot makes a better sense. Pilot is like a 2-3 month engagement with a small amount, taking care of the tech expenses. Those details we can share, but those are two options, Tanushree, before getting into, oh, I want to use this for my entire org setup.
I'll just add one more point, Tanushree. What we found is that for I mean, assessing the, like what you said, the interface, a trial is okay. But I think the real sense you will get is when you bring a larger data set or two or three data sets with connectors. And that's where that pilot or POC kind of thing over 2, 3 months makes sense, because you can then sit with that with an actual data, see what analysis coming out from your data, right? And that's where we import the data essentially that comes
Right.
in. And then we also do a little bit of hand holding to help you uh, bring the right kind of data together. And usually that process uncovers a lot for people in terms of readiness, how does it slot in, and then gives them ideas on how to potentially integrate going forward. So that we can kind of have a call and kind of figure out what makes most sense.
Right. Right. Thank you.
Sure.
Hey, Yashna and Akshay, thank you so much. The project seems really, really interesting. I was particularly interested in the last part, the highlights part that you were showing about. So we do a lot of impact interviews with our participants, and so these interviews happen in Kannada majorly, and then we have people who translate it to English. And then we sit for the analysis of it. We write impact stories of them and all of that. So what I was curious to understand is, like I just got a glimpse of the language that was showing up in your demo. That is pretty, like, like well-defined, high-quality English. But when the translators actually send the data to us,
Yeah.
it is mostly transliterated. We are still trying to get them to move to translation. So how well will the system work? How well can the system work with that kind of English is what I want to understand.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So I can answer that on multiple levels, right? One is to say that, like, if you have recordings in Kannada, we also have integrated with the Sarvam system. So what you can then do is just upload the audio and get diarized translations in English, right? So, that's one way of also solving for that problem, so that you actually have translated English that you can then annotate, as in, that's one way to kind of solve that problem. The second is to say that what we found is that, in some cases, we are getting code switch data, right? That's the best way I can kind of relate to what you're saying, right? Like, so in a particular data set, you might have some things in Hindi, some things in English, or a mix English kind of thing, which is maybe closer to the transliterated data. So what we found is that from the annotation suggestions side of things, it does a decent job with that. But there might be certain words that might be colloquial, etc. That base model hasn't been trained on, right? Because at the end of the day, these models are not magic. In that sense, the various models that we leverage for different features, right? So what happens then is that if it is something too specific, colloquial, etc., it may not pick up on that sort of nuance. But yeah, so that's the answer I can give. The other is, we can also look at that data together and kind of see, how it manages, because I don't know the actual quality of the data. And yeah, mostly we've dealt with translated data with some transliterated words, that kind of thing.
Yeah, that's fair. I think that answers my question. Thank you.